Did we like that one then? How are we feeling? A little disappointed is how I came away from this race. And I think perhaps, thinking back to 2016, comparing it to that, the Azerbaijan Grand Prix in 2019 wasn't too bad. But when you consider it to last season, to 2017, it wasn't quite the chaotic race that I'm guessing a lot of us kind of expected. And looking at Formula 2, which was absolute chaos, yeah, I think I do come away from this race a little bit disappointed, but nevertheless, there is some talking points from this race. But as I'm guessing you all know, spoiler warnings for the 2019 Azerbaijan Grand Prix. You've been warned. Mercedes won 2 again. A little bit surprised because coming into this weekend, it seemed almost certain that Ferrari would be the team to beat, a little bit like Bahrain. Quick in a straight line, one of the longest straights on the calendar. It all made sense. But on Saturday, Mercedes got the job done. Leclerc, that mistake in Q2, into the barriers. On a street circuit, it's not forgiving. He started in 8th place due to multiple penalties, Vettel in 3rd. But there was just no answer to Mercedes, who at the beginning, on the first lap, Bottas, who was on pole position, had a really nice getaway, but Hamilton's was even better. They had a little ding-dong battle through the first lap, and it was super, super close for contact. But apart from that, relatively unchallenged for Mercedes. And so for the 4th time this year in 4 races, a 1-2 for the Silver Arrows. Bottas with 2 wins now, Hamilton with 2 wins now. Vettel becomes only the 3rd driver to have multiple podiums this season, his 2nd this time out, but didn't really look at any point in the race look like he was going to challenge. And arguably, we'll talk about this a little bit later on, I think Ferrari once again really messed up their strategy, because I think they could have had a chance of a win today. They could have had a chance, but we'll talk about that a little bit later on. The full race result is on your screen right now. Bottas and Hamilton and Vettel were your top 3. Max Verstappen with the Honda engine really impressing today. In actual fact, almost, if things had gone his way late on with a virtual safety car, he could have been one of those drivers in contention for the win. Things didn't quite pan out as I'm guessing a lot of us would have liked after that virtual safety car. However, 4th place, he will be thoroughly enjoying that one. Charles Leclerc, P5... fastest lap, so 11 points, only 1 less than Verstappen, only 4 less than Vettel. I still feel this is a day where he's going to come away. Yes, that's a big recovery drive from yesterday, but I still think it's almost a what could have been for Charles Leclerc today. Again, we'll talk about that a little bit later on, Ferrari's strategy, but 5th and a fastest lap, I think looking at yesterday's dramas, that'll be fine. That will be fine. Perez, P6, solid job in the racing points. 7th and 8th for McLaren. Sainz just beating out Norris there. That is a big haul of points for them, as they actually, in my opinion, could be one of the teams to beat in the best of the rest fight. Stroll, P9, really strong job from Lance Stroll. And Kimi Raikkonen from the pits, pit lane start, got the final point in 10th. Alex Albon was 11th. A bit of a nothingy day for Albon. A few moves here and there, but nothing really as special as last time out in China. Giovinazzi P12. Magnussen and Hulkenberg 13th and 14th. Their pace for both teams, Renault and Haas, was just nowhere all weekend. And in the race, both teams tried to go for a little bit of a different strategy, but ultimately didn't work out. Both teams with no points, and those are the 2 teams that a lot of people think should be fighting for that best of the rest, so they've got a lot of work to do. And the final 2 finishers, George Russell and Robert Kubica. Russell and Kubica finished every race so far this season, and funnily enough, Russell's probably been my best driver in my fantasy team because he can actually finish races, which is something a lot of drivers at the moment are really struggling to do. Non-finishers, we'll talk about those first. Daniel Ricciardo and Danny Kvyat. This was one of the main-ish talking points of the race. Obviously, going into Baku, we expected a safety car. There wasn't one. There was a virtual safety car, but We'd gone about 30 laps through the race and there was no sort of incident whatsoever. We then pan over to Bottas overtaking Charles Leclerc. Leclerc hadn't come in at this point. The camera then instantly pans over to a Renault and a Toro Rosso in the wall, and we're thinking, oh my god, here it is. Here's the safety car which is going to save this race. Here we go, rubbing our hands, we're all grinning, and then we get the slow letdown. The slow letdown that no one's in the wall. There's not really much damage. They're going to be able to get going again. But what had happened is Daniel Ricciardo, who had been struggling so much in that Renault this weekend, the king of the brakes, the king of the late overtake, Daniel Ricciardo, went for a move on Kvyat, the torpedo, always a risky one that one is, didn't quite get the braking right. Went straight on, caused Kvyat to almost to avoid in action. He couldn't then get the car turned in. He then was stopped, blocking Ricciardo from reversing, but the Honey Badger doesn't mind. The Honey Badger just reversed into him, and it was crazy. It was crazy. I don't think, in all my years of watching F1, I don't think I've ever seen a driver reverse into another driver, but ultimately, the damage from that, both drivers out, came in a few laps later to retire. Caused a virtual safety car, but that is why those two were at the bottom of the list. Romain Grosjean, another one who did not finish, another one in my fantasy team in actual fact. Gasly, Grosjean and Ricciardo, 3 of the 4 that didn't finish are in my fantasy team, so that's brilliant. Grosjean, difficult race for Haas. They just could not get the tyres working this weekend. He had a little spin, he had a little excursion onto one of the runoff areas. It was really messy. They tried to do something a little bit different with the strategy. That didn't work. It was not ideal for Grosjean, and that's 3 DNFs now. Just like Ricciardo, both Grosjean and Ricciardo have had 3 DNFs out of 4 races. That is a crazy amount considering that it's so tight in the midfield and points are so hard to come by. It's going to be a long year, I think, if this trend continues for those 2 drivers. And the other boy not to finish was Pierre Gasly, one of my predictions to be on the podium, and he went for a really unique strategy. Just like Grosjean, just like Leclerc, started on the medium tyres, went really long into the race, hoping for a safety car. Gasly, though, I think with the help of the Red Bull and the pace that the Red Bull had this particular weekend, was able to get himself into 6th place. Then, even after he'd come in for his pit stop, was just hanging around that sort of space. Had a little ding-dong with Charles Leclerc, while Ferrari were bottling their strategy. But he retired, some form of power unit failure. We're not too sure just yet on the full details, but another one in my fantasy team. Could have picked up so many points, and he was running a really strong race, Gasly. Lots of overtakes, held up Verstappen for a little while as well. Looked racy against Leclerc, and actually, I think this is probably his best race since joining Red Bull. However, it was not to be. Ended with no points. But I do just want to mention Ferrari, because you can't talk about this race or this whole weekend without talking about Charles Leclerc. And this isn't a fanboy moment, don't worry. There will be none of that today. But I think he was really the glue of this race, and that sounds stupid, but bear with me a second. I don't think if Leclerc had this alternate strategy, the race would have been as exciting, because knowing that he had the potential, if a safety car came out, he was on the perfect strategy to steal a win from Mercedes, but Ferrari almost decided to go against that. And ultimately did what they did last time out in China, ended up, I'm going to have to just say this bluntly, they almost screwed over Leclerc's strategy, trying to hold back the Mercedes to help Vettel. And while Leclerc, who I think actually did a really good job of this for 2 laps, really did a great job of backing up Bottas into Hamilton, Vettel still wasn't catching. So it was screwing over Leclerc, it was screwing over Bottas, so in theory that could have helped out Vettel. But it didn't. Mercedes almost just, once Leclerc had gone into the pits, it was all fine. But it just seemed really bizarre that they tried in trying to help Vettel, Leclerc then lost out to Verstappen, and by a comfortable margin, so much so that Verstappen was a whole pit stop almost ahead of Leclerc come the end of the race. So it was very, very messy from Ferrari, from their strategy guys, and I think if they'd have tried a 2-stop, hoping that there'd have been a safety car, they would have been better off. And of course, hindsight is brilliant, but another mistake from Ferrari. But like I've said a few times, Leclerc is putting them in positions where it's making it difficult for team orders, and that's exactly what he needs to be doing at the moment. And I'll be talking about that in winners and losers in a few days' time. Driver of the day. Difficult to pick, actually. There were a few standout names you could argue, but nothing too spectacular. It wasn't like last time where we saw Albon, it wasn't like Bahrain with Charles Leclerc. I think it was a little bit more difficult, perhaps, to pick this, but there were, I'd say, 4 or 5 names that were in the mix, and Kimi Raikkonen is my driver of the day this time round. Lance Stroll was close, and I think Max Verstappen was also pretty close, but Raikkonen edges it for me, proving he's still got speed. Just like last season, this speed almost has come back to Kimi, and it's brilliant to see. Starting from the pit lane, working his way comfortably through the field, nice overtakes, getting the better of his teammate, having a bit of a ding-dong battle with some of the, well, I was going to say the Haas cars, but it's not like they were a huge annoyance this race. I just thought Raikkonen getting into the points on a circuit where he has admitted in the past he doesn't particularly love. I was just quite impressed with that one. Stroll just finished 1 place ahead of Raikkonen, and Verstappen really impressed me with the pace of that Honda engine, and the fact that he was in the mix late on into the race, that was, yeah, mega job from Verstappen. And the race rating, I came in to this video saying it was a boring race, but I've given it a 7 out of 10. A little bit controversial, perhaps, but I compare it to other races this season. Did I enjoy this more than China? Hell yes. Did I enjoy this more than Melbourne? I think so. Wasn't the best race of the season. Bahrain has got that still comfortably, and I don't want to judge this race comparing it to last year or 2017, because I think this was a very different race to that. It wasn't a crash fest. It wasn't any in-your-face bizarre moments going on, except that balloon on circuit was a particular highlight, in my opinion. But 7 out of 10, because it was a strategic race. There was that little bit of, if there's a safety car now, this whole race is turned on its head. It was a little bit, the gaps between the top 3 wasn't too far away, and even in the last couple of laps, Hamilton was sniffing around for a victory, but ultimately it was a fine race. I enjoyed it. Would I watch it again? Potentially. So it gets a 7. It gets a 7. Nothing too crazy, but it was better than normal, I would say. But let me know in the comments below who was your driver of the day and what your race rating was. And the championship looks a little bit like this. Your top 3, Valtteri Bottas regains the lead on 87 points. Hamilton just 1 point behind on 86. And then 34 points behind is Sebastian Vettel, who jumps into the top 3 for the first time this season. Only 1 point ahead of Verstappen, only 5 points ahead of Charles Leclerc. Mercedes are running away with this, and someone's going to have to try and stop them. Next time out in Spain is where Ferrari look good in winter testing. Am I being a little too optimistic? Some people say I am, but it's only a matter of time until Ferrari get a win, because they do have a good car this year. They just need a clean weekend. Anyway, next couple of days, winners and losers will be out, and we'll be talking more about the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.